where I enter in on motivation. And motivation can happen a lot of different ways. And I think part of what we were talking about before, should I just do this? Should I just kind of go through the slide and see what happens?
How does that tie? How does that tie
break
back?
out? So it would be a one-on-one for y'all.
Yeah.
How does that tie back?
Environmental health and safety compliance.
It ties in the following, actually. The way that, gosh, it sounds so weird that I don't think they're recording anything here, but I guess we'll see if that is the case. And your name is?
I'm Brian Perry.
Hi, Ryan Perry. I'm Shirley Rivera. We're going to have a podcast moment. Let me, it ties into the way that the language used in procedures, training, mission statements, whatever you want to call it, can be better served with sequencing of the expected desired behaviors. So, as a for instance, when I was talking to Brent.
Well, can I
Yeah.
give you something that I've recently?
Yes, because last time in the other session, nobody had anything, which doesn't mean it was bad, but yes, please go ahead.
So I've got this situation where I've got underground storage. We're using a meter roots. If you know, have any knowledge of underground storage tanks, this system monitors the interstitial spaces
Okay.
and the double wall.
Okay.
And our expectation of our maintenance professionals that they go in every month, they make sure that that meter root system is printing out a passing test for both of the tanks.
Okay. So they actually have a couple of tasks to do while they're getting from point A to point B.
Yeah,
Got it.
So that as part of their routine, once a month, check in on this section of the so TCEQ contacts us. Like, okay, guys, they're coming. Let me go pull all the records. I'm going through and I'm pulling the records. There it is. Fail, 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 fail.
So there's no corrective. There's
No, not even looking.
Oh, that is why it's failed.
They're not even looking.
Because there's nothing there that's being recorded.
Guys, all you gotta do is log in here, look at this thing, flip it up, pull the piece of paper out, and then stick it back in.
So I'm going to do this. I know exactly. I understand what you're saying. So you described a lot of things, which shouldn't necessarily have to be interrupted because all of those activities are happening in the same environment. And you're saying perhaps it could be a motivation issue.
It's on the preventative maintenance tab, the line item. They sign off on it. They should do that. They've done it.
So they've signed off on, so they are also not truthfully recording the actions that they're doing. So
and there's other things that play here, right? It's like management.
yeah. Okay. This is the issue, what you just got to about accountability, because they've learned a behavior that there's no consequence. So Ryan's not allowed to hit them over the head with a stick.
Nor do I want.
Nobody wants to hit anybody over the head with a stick. Nobody wants to. Even a pool noodle. Nobody wants to do that. It's fun, but no. You know, I mean, I was going to start to ask about the context of where this happened so I could understand how behaviors are already happening, given the fact that you had started to say there's this list. So here's where I was thinking, oh, there's this list. What are the successes that they've had so that I could understand what is so different about this sequence with the tank compared to these other things that they might be successful at and doing properly, timely, because this will give you an indicator generally of at least an individual's behavior, but even more so, you'll start to find different patterns. So the fact that and I'm sorry, I don't want to create this narrative, but I want to make sure this is fair. the fact that you also mentioned about inconsistency and accountability, it's probably a way to bracket it, is the context that this is living in. That's the point. So do they need to or want to? So often, go ahead.
The maintenance, the hands-on turning the wrench maintenance activities that are part of that list, them is more valuable.
Because they're making something happen. That's,
And they,
yes.
And they know if they don't do it, it will go back.
Because they are making something that they have pride in knowing that the outcome is of their own agency, and not to diss your tag. Go ahead.
Checking the ticker today is
Not of their doing. I mean, when I say that, I mean, it's not a thing that they have really made happen. This is, yeah.
Nor do they not. They just,
Well,
it's compliance.
So I don't know how, and I think this is a longer conversation, there's probably a way to frame that activity, and because the practice of inconsistent accountability exists in the environment, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to what are considered by BJ Fogg. So he's the one that is the Tiny Habits creator within behavior design. Consider the ability chain. So when there's something weak in this ability chain, the idea is to go to that and fix it first. And so I want to get to it just so you can see it. And it helps me stay on.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because this happened last time 3 years ago, and we created the people, we added tasks.
So you added something that was already wildly successful, and you have it. So I mean, I think this. So okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is, you know, that Sesame Street thing. One of these things don't belong. So you've got this happening where there's agency, and you've got like, oh, and they have learned that inconsistent accountability is neutral. And, you know, so there are different ways of.
It's that ABC.
Yeah.
Antecedent.
Yeah. So all right, Ryan, we're going to do this. We're going to speed through this because your brain, I think, works pretty fast. So with Tiny Habits is literally, and have you heard of BJ Fogg or Tiny Habits or Atomic Habits?
I've heard Tiny Habits.
Okay.
But my only context for that, I think, is the radio.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe it was on
NPR.
Yes, that has happened. So in the description of this session before this is a link to a January 2021 webinar that was done for 4C. It's a little bit, you'll see like Tiny Habits sprinkled throughout that presentation. And this is sort of intended to, the past session to kind of jump up from there. So it is as simple as this. After I put my hard hat on, I will touch my ears. Super simple. We already know what's happening here. It's probably the starter step to like, do I have my hearing protection? So that's a tiny habit. Very simple, easy, less than 5 seconds even. And they're already putting their hard hat on. This is the added thing. That's simple. Not. Yeah, your hands are near your ears. And the idea for Tiny Habits is ABC, anchor, behavior, celebration. So the idea is to intrinsically, immediately celebrate what was done for the dopamine hit. So you've got the neurochemistry working for you. And the idea is basically all of a sudden associating this action with, oh, good, right? So another way is after I put my hard hat on, maybe it's, I will tap my wearable tag if somebody has, digital related activities. BJ is known for, in a TED Talk, after I put my feet on the ground when I wake up, I will say today's going to be a great day. Priming for the positive thought, and then whatever he does to celebrate. So it might be like, yes, for some people it's a smile, maybe it's a dance, who knows how they celebrate when their sports team scores. It could be that, or the visualization of it, because that in itself is, athletes do it all the time. So the idea is we do all these things a lot. Something we're doing a lot just because. And so you've added that they've got to go to the tank off of everything else that's on this list. So I don't even know if having that list be something separate, tethered to something else that they could also do that's in that environment, or that has a.
Well, I mean, the whole idea of putting it there.
That's sort of where a lot of people talk about, the incentives and having that feeling. That is part of the celebration aspect. Side note, I'm just going to say, and if you want to exchange information, I can send you this article because it's really quite interesting. Just simply stated, emotions create habits. And a lot of other habit formation approaches do that the same way. I'm going to run through these real quickly. You can see, how people do change management, but they don't always do it. And so this was a result after I punch in for work on Monday. I will touch the PSM RMP folder. This was a suggestion that a federal EPA inspector gave as part of when they were looking at the RMP related, what is it? Is it like a triennial audit or whatever's happening? They were taking that over. Notice this. So he is aware of tiny habits, and he's all like, this is at least a starter step that now everybody's on notice that there's something in this folder that everybody's going to be talking about for change management. And I thought this was really interesting because people are going to punch in. And if they see that, they know. Now, whether or not they're going to be happy about going to the meeting, this is a visual cue that something has happened versus all the other different ways that ends up being, notified.
And even just the fact that you're calling it out and saying, trying to create this habit shows the importance.
It shows the importance of it, and it's super easy. They just have to touch. Ideally, maybe you want them to sign later, but there's also something associated with, depending on the workers, the value of punching in and punching out. This could have been a punch out for work. There's a lot of different ways to decide how to do this. So the point being, let's say somebody does have this issue with change management, and even just follow through along the whole change, filling out the forms, sitting down, talking about it, getting everybody together. It might be that this anchor is different. Maybe there's a segment of the population where the morning is different from the evening folks. But really in the end, you're just trying to say, okay, I got to make sure I know and they know that change management is happening. This one, I was talking about this where contractors are on site or interns after I stand in front of a hazmat storage area. Am I going to look at my site map for where that star is for the shower? I could, or maybe you gave me a card and it's super small, or I just learned to start making people do this. And it's kind of part of a memory thing. It's not quite memory palace, but it's also integrating into the habits. I'm going to point to the shower. And, after a couple of times, and it could just happen all day because maybe that person's passing the storage tank area, they just know that shower, eye wash station, egress, ingress, whatever. So it's very simple things like this that are almost playful can be included. And then eventually nobody's, they know. No, it's like, oh, I know where the shower is. And no one's thinking about it anymore because all of a sudden, maybe after they pass the shower, there's another habit that happens, or who knows? Who knows what else can happen?
He's thinking about it.
Yeah, and they know where it's at, and hopefully, if there's somewhere else on the site, yes,
Know where it's at.
where it's at, and if they are somewhere else, and they might not be sure where the shower is, they probably, if part of their job is to go around the storage area, know where they're at, where the storage area is, and they can visually figure it out from there, hopefully, right? This one, did I? Yeah, after I set the tanker truck parking brake, so if it is a driver, I'll look at the windsock, directions at a site. This is simply at the top, how to.
So it's as simple as, there's something I already do. I'm just adding.
Yeah. After I do something I already do, because I just do it no matter what, I sit in my office chair. I'm going to touch my water glass. Am I drinking water? No, not yet, but I know that I have this water glass. After I turn off the TV at night, which is maybe tethered to my laptop, I will walk my laptop to my home office. So, after, so I have this, I got a new dog, first dog. I have, after I pick up my dog's deal, when he does his thing, I will do 4 squats. So I try to, and I'm like, oh, I feel good about this. And then I was like, well, if it's tiny enough, I can just do 2. I'll call it 2. And if I do more than 2, yay me.
Right.
But I've done 2, I get to celebrate, I could do more. And so it's that kind of thing. And I don't even know, I know that I've done it because I know that it's, the 2 are always in there because I've got to bend down anyways, but then I just do this, looks like I'm going up and down on an elevator and it just happens. And sometimes, like I said, I'll finish doing what I did, walk in, I'm like, did I do it? I'm like, oh, I probably did. Just like I walk into a room and I turn off the light. That kind of sense memory, if you will. And I'd say, with the people that you're talking about, sense, touch, hear, smell, sight, like getting to know where somebody gravitates toward jumping off of doing another action, you'll know your people. It is helpful. So yes, it is that. And it is all 3. I did a thing I already do. I got this new thing. Yay me. If you don't do it, but you remember you didn't do it, you run it through your head, visualize it, because that is as helpful. Just like athletes do that. People talk a lot about Stephen Curry, who's just like 3 pointers all the time. Yeah. Like, and we're all surprised, like, he didn't make that. What just happened to the world? And I don't think anybody thinks that he's not going to make it when he's at the 3-point mark. Because it's like, oh, yeah, I mean, it used to be super eventful, and it's like, okay, great, this is awesome. I think there's a guy, George Mumford, that also does a lot of things with athletes. So yeah, and the specificity and clarity, the better. So this is getting back to your question earlier about how does this have to do with EH&S. Sometimes the procedures are broad sweeping enough where procedure step 1, 2, and 3 are forcing someone's brain to fill in the narrative of what they're doing.
Okay.
But sometimes even those extra little bullets help. And so
in that procedure, do you think it's important?
I think it's important. So the answer is yes, in this way. Understand how and why the preventative maintenance checklist is so meaningful to them. So really understand that part. And they'll probably tell you why they think, I mean, they're not going to say it's inconsistent accountability.
Right. No, they're going to say, if I don't do the water chemistry, we can have motion.
Right. Yeah. So if I don't do this, so again, just like anything else, so you're talking about the consequence. So if there's the consequence aspect, and if they're motivated by framing it differently, if the water chemistry is great, the best thing about this is boom, whatever. You don't have to do A, B, C, or D afterwards. So you can use positive or negative reinforcement, or just kind of that neutral, just the facts. It's going to depend on the specific person that's doing the action in the context. So right now, while context is typically the environment, I'd also say the kind of mental environment of inconsistent accountability, that's breaking that habit. That's yeah. You're asking really good questions, and I hope I'm replying well enough. So yeah,
Yeah. you're doing great.
yeah. You're welcome. Graphically, behavior, motivation, ability, prompt. If any of these three don't come together at the same time, the behavior doesn't happen. So the idea is simply low motivation, high motivation, hard to do, easy to do on the other axis, and figuratively, the green action line represents things on that side are where things are going to happen. They're motivated enough, super, you know, it's easy enough for them to do. And really going back to the tiny habits piece, it lives in that bottom right-hand corner. So this is what, yeah.
Well, and that's my biggest frustration with my example is so easy.
It's easy for you because you are a person that can see the action and the context being done. So the motivation piece gets back to that ability chain. So physically, the effort is not a big deal, or maybe they think it is, I don't know, or it's something. Time-wise, I would argue, no, it's not a time issue, right? Because it's money, you've given them enough resources to succeed and do this, and there's no additional technology or tool that's needed. So I think there's this mental effort. And on the part that is the last item, routine, they have enjoyed a routine of not doing it. So this is what needs to be, I'm going to call it deconstructed. As, yeah, as opposed to broken. I'm going to say deconstructed because I bet you there's probably somebody that's like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. And so this is basically what it looks like, right?
Well, and that's the other thing. It's this task is executed by.
So,
over the course,
okay,
and it's
consistently, because the environment is inconsistent accountability. It's, which is a joyful thing. No, I mean, but you know, and you know, as a person from the outside, I can say this, and you know, because I don't have an emotional tether to the experience you have, but also it's a pattern. So in motivation, there's sort of that aspect also, you know, where people are trying to decide. So there is also, separate to this, the behavior design model does also have a component deals with choice. So there's sort of, you know, that's a different presentation. We can talk about that. Also, if you're going to go to the rooftop thing, I have decided I will socialize. So, yeah, well, you know, social homeostasis. I get to a certain point and I'm like, ah, but I think I'm fine.
Yeah, we all have.
I hit mine yesterday, so I didn't go to, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I told the story here because I do air quality and I've done power generation work, so like a control room. After I turn off the excess emissions alarm, I will walk to the compliance record keeping binder because air quality requirements still have this pen to paper thing. It used to be that they're like, how come we can't get our operators to do this? Because they sit there, they deal with the alarms, and they put the book on the shelf because that's what they wanted them to do. So this is before Tiny Habits. I came in and I'm like, no, put the book behind them on this tiny shelf so they can turn it off, turn around, do this thing, make a mark, and then come back. Do not make them get out of their chair because they still have to deal with other parts of the alarm system. And, you know, when I found Tiny Habits, I said, oh, it puts a name on top of stuff I've been doing in fixing and editing procedures.
Well, I work at
Okay, so you know what operators.
but yeah, and it's not just that emissions alarm.
Oh, well, exactly.
They're like, why is it doing this?
Yeah,
Right?
they have to figure it out. They have to troubleshoot
The
it.
oxygen, the fuel flow.
Exactly.
And is my emission controls working? Is like for $7 we get, you know, ammonia.
So did you have a gas plant, gas turbine plant, or
It was, yes,
boiler?
it was
Okay, good.
It was a peaking
Yeah.
facility.
Okay, yeah, same thing,
Yeah.
same thing. I was at a peaking facility. So later on, there's a picture in front of aqueous ammonia tank. So I'm from California. Yeah, so like I understand why the binder was supposed to be, well, it's line of sight. They should remember. No one's doing that.
Well, and so I work for NextEra Energy.
Okay,
Their corporate procedure shut the plant down if there's an excess
what?
emission.
Lose money, I saw like,
And I was like, that's wonderful.
seriously?
Let's shut it down.
You did,
Yeah. Shut it down.
supposed to shooting?
All the power sources.
Oh, I see what you're doing. Okay.
It would say, shut down the potential excess emission. Watch that. Have that.
Yeah.
And we're gonna-
So it's funny when you say that. So here's what I'm thinking. So I've dealt with a peaker plant and I've dealt with a cogen, that has a PPA, which is very different. That's why when my response, no money, it was really kind of, that's not what you do at the cogen plant. That's also providing, yeah, but at a peaker plant,
If we didn't have a successful startup, that's when.
yeah, on the clock hour or not. Yeah, that one within the clock hour. Yeah, so, I mean, I think, oh, this is good. I don't get to come across many power plant folks, and I'm just on the regulatory permitting, so I should say just, but, I'll make the comment. These are, I call them, some of them are airport books. So part of the presentation I gave was about different ways that habit formation is talked about. And often people say, oh, like Atomic Habits, because they know about James Clear's book. Are you familiar with any of these books? Power of Habit, Atomic Habits, How to Change, Good Habits, Bad Habits.
Good habits, bad.
Okay, Wendy Wood. So she is also cited by the gentleman below that Build Strong Habits. He has a podcast, Andrew Huberman. It's fabulous. So if you want to hear about neuroscience in accessible language, him. So he's got stuff that deals with focus. He has a podcast on focus. He has this one on habits. He has one on mindset, interview with a woman. And I think, if you are interested, let me know. I'll email you because this helps me to start to curate my information a certain way. So what I like about Good Habits, Bad Habits, have you gone through a little bit of it or just sort of read a summary?
Just a summary.
Her emphasis is about sort of creating that automaticity. So that's that sequencing. Yeah. So both on the good habit, bad habit realm.
It just becomes like breathing.
Yeah, it is like breathing.
That's what you're
Yeah.
just-
And where breathing isn't the habit of eating sprinkled donuts all the time, but yes, yeah, you go in knowing, so this is where choice comes in. So I do talk about where Atomic Habits takes tiny habits and stacks them. Hard hat on, ear, nose, maybe nose, tag, whatever. So just starts to tag. So I think in your case, you're hoping preventive maintenance checklist, water chemistry, you're trying to habit stack.
So what I'm thinking, as is so easy that,
The outcome, so break it down. Go ahead.
yeah. Building, center of the building is the old control room. Data root is and the water chemistry.
Okay.
They probably walk into that space once.
Okay.
So my tiny change.
Your tiny habit. What did they already do? Yeah, so you want to language it. You can. You want to language it after I walk into the room or after I close the door behind me or whatever works for that person. Yeah. Yeah, I touched. So in theory, you're going to hope to have it stacked. So if they even get 50% of the 50-50, they're touching and they're starting to do it, or whichever persons are, yes to that. Could that tiny behavior be a little bit more like, I will open this, I will, whatever you are familiar. Yeah, you could. I'm a fan of starter steps.
Then how long How long do you take it?
Ideally, it's the same thing that you answered before, which was like, they're just doing it. Like maybe they just forgot they did it, but they know they did it because that's, so I will say in Atomic Habits framework, you do it at the same time. You go ahead and bring up the stack and you frame it and position it in a way that the stack is something they want to do and can get through fairly simply. So
Because
yeah.
the avoidance of the next.
Some people are more motivated by consequence, others are not. I mean, I think there's, you know, the thought that, well, it's the bias of positive psychology, right? And I mean, from a different perspectives, I don't talk about this that much on the coaching side, but, you know, some people have different inner critics where certain strengths are taking over more than the things where they can go out and make something positive happen. So, you know, everybody's a little different.
Well, I'll tell you, after I second 3-year inspection,
Okay.
which we didn't really fail. Like I'm able to prove that we're in compliance.
Mm-hmm.
It's just much more difficult.
More difficult because,
That documented record.
so I'm going to say,
So there is the documented record, but I'm able to prove to the auditor, and I've been able to do this 2 inspections in a row, is that the only reason we were receiving this test, failed test, because of the low fuel.
the low flow, right. So I'm going to say what we already know about the narrative that you've carried around
Oh, okay.
is it's happening because of inconsistent accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing. So this happens. The very next day, I talked to the supervisor and I'm like, I need to do a training. And with everybody on the team. And I need to investigate what's going on. So part of my training, right? So I build this training, I'm explaining why this is important regulation. Thing. And then I show up with PM, show them the PM. But do you guys see where you signed on here for the past?
Yeah.
Have you done this? Like, how can we make this better?
So it's real, yeah. And so I think it's even saying, here are some options where I want to make this easier. And you tell me what you think is easier, because, and don't judge them.
No.
Yeah. And it might be, you're going to get amongst the 14, you might get what maybe are 3 common categories, you know, of that. And if the answer is something like, well, you know, nothing happens if we don't do it, that's not an answer to what the question you asked. And you know that, right? Because that's a redirect.
I did get that answer.
Yeah, of course.
I didn't know.
Yeah, big inconsistent accountability. Yeah.
And I also thought it's so.
That one's a little different. So I don't,
quick.
yeah.
With little bullet points like you.
So, I mean, that's even it. I mean, you said it properly. So, I mean, it might seem weird. Look at the sequence, look at the languaging. If something needs to be bold-faced, just do it. Increase the font size. I know this sounds weird because half of this might also be, so I've done this where I took, again, decades ago, procedures, and I'm like, I can't work in just the same space. I'm going to do that thing that I've seen where you have this margin. You got your keywords because these guys talk in keywords, and now I'm going to structure this differently. I'm going to ask them what they want the header to say because they keep making fun of this procedure, because I don't care what the header looks like. I just need them to do it. Literally, the design of the procedure was enough to make them interested. And I think part of it, and I'm going off of memory, is they could talk about like what was their part that they contributed. It was almost like a competition. Did that work somewhat?
Yeah.
For some, yeah. So there's a different thing I did this a long time ago, 2016. I like to combine applied improv and improv games into training that maybe makes sense or doesn't make sense to some people, but even just you have your, aqueous ammonia unloading procedure, and only certain people have to do certain parts of it. But the problem is it's this procedure that involves certain people, and they're, trace precedent and trace dependent, for lack of a better word. Okay, so the idea was Thunderdome is a game where two people go in a circle and they're just yelling words that are part of the procedure. And the rules are you can't repeat and you can't stammer or stutter. And when you do, you're out. So there's teams, let's say there's teams of 5 each, and it's to go in. And the idea at the end is, there's one that wins. And it sounds ridiculous, but you start to see that people are like, oh man, you didn't know that, you got that wrong. And then when you say differently, another way to just do a procedure is like this thing called string of pearls, where it's an exercise in improv where you tell a story, but in this way, somebody tells one part of the story, somebody tells another part, and people start to fill in the blank. So it is still the procedure, but they're sort of, also trying to game the system because they're going to pick the thing they remember, and they're going to hope that maybe others don't. But the goal of that game is to have a string of pearls, so that there is enough information that by the end of it, if you were to read everything somebody came in where they were popcorning, that it is the procedures. It might not be exactly worded the same, but it's how they word it. And like that alone is really insightful, because you start going, we don't have that in a procedure. But then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, if we just got to add that to make it stick better, let's do that. And now they have the sense memory of I won Thunderdome. We did a string of pearls, and that kind of physical movement, memory, sense memory, competition or whatever is good, but I don't get to do those as much
And
anymore.
just the